subscription defines the cadence at which you receive goods, and membership defines the benefits that come with engaging with a brand, putting your money where your mouth is, and engaging with the brand for the long term.
All right, folks, we are back from another ROAS, all the way from France. We were able to wrangle Tim Masek, bring in yellow and sexy back to the internet with 1-800-D2C.com. Tim, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Roa.
Yeah, and for some of you that don't know, I just found this out actually offline. Tim's first language is actually French. He is right now living it up in the... Is Corsica considered the French Riviera? No, right? Is it part of that or no?
No, it's a French Riviera.
It's beautiful though.
The south, and then it's an island off the south. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. I my fiance wants to go there. It's very Como-esque vibes, right? Where it's like it's just stunning.
Well, yeah, you've got the cool thing about Corsica is you've got the mountains and the beach all really close to each other. It's like super mountainous, but a tiny little island in the med.
So you were telling me you actually grew up because you went to school in the States, right? You went to NYU and then Cornell.
Yeah. So I grew up in Europe. I was living. I was born in France, and then I lived in London for a number of years. And then because I have the U.S. passport, I was able to go study in the U.S. So I went to NYU for undergrad, and then stayed there, worked in the advertising space, and then after a number of years being in New York, it was like 9 years total. I decided to move back to London, where I live full time. It was just nice to be closer to home, closer to Europe, and I've been there since for the past 3 years.
So I was recently out in London. I gotta tell you, fantastic city, really fun city, but I don't know if I just didn't do it right, or I previously went to Barcelona. And again, it's not an apples to apples comparison. New York and London is probably a more fair comparison than a Barcelona to London. But I gotta tell you, it's incredibly expensive. Like the hotel room I got was like a regular hotel room. It was $1 million. Flights were really expensive. It's crowded and like not in a... So Barcelona, like I love, especially when I go to these cities, because there's really not any walkable cities outside the U.S. Except for New York. New York you can kind of walk, but everything else is fairly. The people in the States love our cars.
Yeah.
And Barcelona was just such a dream. Like I could just walk around there carefree. Like it was just really set up to walk. They have these big thoroughfares. All the crosswalks are awesome. You don't have the stress of traffic. Where London, I didn't get that. People, and this had to drive you crazy coming from a New Yorker for 9 years. Like in Manhattan in specific, like you'll get trampled. Like if you don't walk, you got to go. In London, people just stroll. You can't get around them. It was driving me crazy. I will give you restaurants, though. The restaurants were amazing. And possibly I didn't do the city right because I didn't go to the Palace. I didn't go to Tower of London. I didn't do the museum. Piccadilly Circus, that area is really cool. It was a cool vibe. But I don't know. Give me stand up for your city here because I was a little bit bearish on it. When I went, I was more bullish than when I left.
Well, I mean, so you also went to Barcelona, and you have to know that you're in vacation mode. So when you're in Barcelona on vacation mode, it's a great place to be. And there's a couple other cities in Europe that are wonderful over the summer break. When it comes to London, it's a very livable city. That's the right word to use. It's a place where you'll find good business opportunities, good work opportunities. And you'll be able to have some sense of balance. New York, so you can compare it to New York in that way, and you wouldn't compare it necessarily to a Barcelona for those reasons. New York's also great for the work opportunities, etc. And as you said, people walk extremely fast. They do everything extremely fast, which is all the charm to New York. And that's why you want to be in New York. That's what you want to get out of New York. But for many people, there comes a stage in their lives when they say, okay, well, do I have to sacrifice all my balance for this? And for me, that happened a couple years ago. And that's why I decided to move back to London, which is still a fast-paced city, lots going on, but a lot more widespread and a lot more balanced. So the last thing I'll say on London to big it up is it's got so much to offer it, and it's difficult to experience that on like a one-off. I'm trying to experience London as a whole. So it's a very widespread city.
That I will give you. I think that was also something that I didn't really recognize. Where somebody's telling me it's almost like 2x New York, which is like bananas to me because New York is just such a massive metropolis, and so that's fair. And maybe that's what it was. Where I really wanted to live in my bubble of like 30, 45-minute walk from where I was staying. So that's fair. I did get to go see Soho District was cool. I got to go to the OG Soho House. That was really cool. You guys love your little kind of clubs. So a friend of mine had, I think it was a homegrown club, like these just little kind of very inconspicuous houses. And then you go in them and they're just like these just gorgeous plaster everywhere, like very cool. So that was neat. But yeah, I don't know. It was just great cars, to be fair. So I had recently went to Dubai 3 or 4 months ago. I forget when. And Dubai is just crazy cars, but there's probably, on average, the cars are probably nicer, quote unquote, in Dubai. But the hypercars, like the real rare ones, I've never seen more than I have in London. So that was a treat for me. I'm a bit of a car guy, but I take your point. You're bringing me back around. Maybe I have to give it another shot and give it more of the breath. Harrods was crazy. That was one of the most incredible things I've experienced. Where the Dubai Fashion Mall was over the top, but Harrods. Like the real estate, just the real estate alone has to be just mind-bogglingly in terms of net worth. Like, I mean, you're right in the middle of everything. This beautiful building.
Yeah, Knightsbridge is like that's a very expensive area, and that's where you'll see all the hypercars. If I can ask, what's like your dream hypercar?
So it's funny you say that. I don't really have a dream hypercar. I mean, so like the Bugattis and the like the fancy ones. I'm a simple man, simple pleasures, Tim. I think like the supercar for me would be the GTR. Just give me a souped up GTR, all-wheel drive. I won't kill myself in it. I still get a ton of performance. There's still some connection with the common man. You don't feel like you're too far apart. In that a LaFerrari would be nice. We saw one of those where it's just, I don't know how that works though, because do the shells behind the seat have like reinforcement or something? Or are they just so wide they're never going to flip? That was the one thing that worried me a bit. If I was that rich, I'd want to have some semblance of safety, but that was a sexy car where it's just the lines on it. We saw a GT40, which is also a sensational car, but it's a super awesome car, but not as fun or it's even more of a flex in London, obviously, because the import taxes are like a car alone by themselves. But yeah, I guess a LaFerrari would be nice. I think the lines on that are just so sexy. But if I was going to get like a supercar, non-hypercar, it'd probably be like a GTR. And they're not insanely egregiously priced where you can get one, 80-ish K. It's still amazing. What about you?
Well, so I don't know that if I ever was in a position to buy one, I don't know that I would ever even buy a hypercar, to be honest with you.
Right.
But like the coolest one I find out there is the F12 Superfast.
Oh, I have to look this up. I don't even know this.
It's a Ferrari Ferrari F12 Superfast. It's just such a cool.
Oh, that we saw one of those. That is a stunning car. Okay. I'm a bit of a Rari guy. I do think like if I went kind of primo douche where it's like, hey, forget it, I'm just gonna let people know where it's at. I think I would get a Rari. That's a beautiful car. That is a beautiful car.
But obviously, the coolest ones are all the vintage cars. Like a vintage 911 is really nice, and
yeah. We saw some pretty fun OG like Mercedes and stuff where it's like, there's just like a little bit of class on that. Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay, maybe you brought me around to London. Fair point. Do you like London more now than New York? Do you miss anything about New York?
I miss a ton of things about New York, and I do. I love living in London. It's where I want to be right now, so I'm super happy there. And then I do go back to New York twice a year for a month every time. So I'll do 1 month in the fall, 1 month in the spring, just because, well, I love the energy there. I have a lot of friends who live there. and there's lots of things happening in the world of e-commerce and related to work. So those are like three good reasons to go back. And yeah, I love it there.
It's amazing. How did you get, I mean, NYU, Cornell, those are fairly prestigious universities. How did you get into marketing, advertising, D2C?
The first I initially, well, basically I've been, and I think a lot of people can relate to this in this space. I've been a fan of consumer brands since I was a kid.
Yep.
So I always thought like I connected to a pair of Nikes in quite a strong way, and it helped me define my identity, for example. And that was not just with Nikes, but with a lot of different brands. And I don't think there's anything like wrong or like consumerist about that. I think it's just how I felt. And so when I went to university, I realized that I kind of wanted to learn what was the art to creating these powerful brands, and so that took me into the world of advertising. And then when I was in advertising, because I was also super interested in entrepreneurship, which is very related to tech, especially at the time, like that's all we spoke about in New York and all we saw. I said, well, I don't just want to do like big ads for big brands. I want to know what it takes to grow a brand in the same way that you're doing it with Triple Whale, for example. If I was to become CMO of a business tomorrow, what would I do? And that took me in the path of performance marketing, growth marketing, which is actually very much in its infancy. This was in 2014, 2015. So
Yep.
still actually pretty early. And I worked for an agency where the founder was one of the most knowledgeable people in the space at the time, and he taught me everything I needed to know about growth marketing. So I got the technical skill set there, and I was tossed in the fire with complicated clients and all that stuff. So I learned to fend for myself and really learn these skills on my own. And that's when I started working on a lot of ecom businesses, because that was the early heyday of Facebook ads and all that stuff. So a lot of people are just trying to milk the machine, and I was helping them do
Yeah.
that. So that
Yeah.
that's how I got from sort of university into the world of brands, and then into the world of performance, which is then correlated to the world of tech and entrepreneurship, and eventually all the way back around to 1-800-DTC and the kind of stuff I'm doing now.
Yeah. That's actually a beautiful progression. I love the thing that you said about Nike. What do you think drives that type of, like, I guess just emotional connection? Is it just resonating with you? Is it aspirational stuff? Is it
Mm.
success? Is it the people they align themselves with, like a LeBron or whatever, the Ronaldo or whoever are aspiring to? What do you think the secret sauce is? Because I'm with you on that. I think that there's a certain aspect that those, what am I trying to say? Those concepts, or basically pillars of awesomeness, kind of relate to D2C as well, right? It's just at a smaller scale, and it's just
Mhm.
different goals, right? Like Nike kind of just wants to be everywhere, whereas a D2C brand might not have those resources to be everywhere, nor do they need to be, because they have a totally different cost structure, et cetera, et cetera. But what are some of the things that you think, like you said in Nike, like other brands that either do well, or like what do you think makes that aura of brand? Because I have this weird
Mhm.
aversion to brand. I think brand's this really nebulous term, but it's also really important to create a brand. I just like to hear how people think brands
Mhm.
manifest.
Yeah, well, it's a very tough question to answer, and I think that's what I tried to set out in my career to at least understand a little bit better over time. But you're basically tapping into something that is very personal and emotional for somebody. And so for me, when I think of
Yeah,
Nike, for example, I think about like the grit and the hard work, and
I
so
love that.
just do it, or the people they back, and the events they put together, everything they do ties, I think, to that emotional idea of like anybody can do anything, uh just get to work. And for me, that resonated a lot with me. And so the great brands of the world, I think, are able to do something, to touch the human on an emotional level.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. Have you read Shoe Dog, the Phil Knight memoir?
Yeah, of course. Have you?
Great. Yeah, great read. Lots of boozing in Japan as well. Crazy
Y-
shoes in Japan, but a very
Yeah,
fun read.
crazy story. Amazing entrepreneur. And yeah, it's funny how
Yeah.
all starts from track. And I don't know if you're into running, but
Yep.
uh,
I
uh,
am actually.
oh, you are. See,
Yeah.
I wouldn't get long distance running shoes from Nike necessarily, but of
Yeah.
course they make great, track sprint running shoes and all that stuff. But it's funny how that kind of evolved over time.
Yeah. Fire on the track. Prefontaine. He was a big. I used to actually run Division 1 cross country and track, and he
No
was a
way.
big inspiration. And then we would buy the Nikes. There was a middle distance to kind of longer distance guy named Bob Kennedy, and he had specific spikes, so everybody would wear the Bob Kennedys and stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Everything you explained in that kind of previous segment is exactly when I unwind why I wanted to wear like the Bob Kennedys, and I was into Steve Prefontaine, and I was a big Oregon Ducks fan. Just I have no connection to Oregon outside of Prefontaine, and then Phil Knight. It's basically like a pseudo Nike campus where he basically gives them whatever they want. He's a huge donor there, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting how, and it's almost fascinating sometimes because you can't really connect the dots backward, or you can't connect them forward. So like to build this strategy out would be really difficult. But like when you look back at it, it seems so not amateur, but very, like for lack of a better word, novice in strategy, but it's actually very high level and complex in terms of the output.
Yeah, totally. It's so it's well, it's difficult to look back on a recent period, and then you can start to see patterns, or you at least try to make sense of everything. And with enough time, I guess it basically, I think it would be an easy task to draw comparisons within anything. So you'll find a
Yes.
storyline no matter what with enough time. But like you said, it's taking the next step is that's the least amount of I guess you can it's the most amount of like gradient where you can go, because it's your first step, so it's going to naturally have like the highest sort of gradient in one way or another, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. It really sets the tone of where you're going to go. And then your next step is obviously a function of your previous step. And so you're going to obviously always have that there. I love that, man. Uh, okay. One last question for you, and then we'll move on to the value add segment. What's the nicest thing someone's done for you?
Mm. I don't know if I mean, so many. I'm grateful for so many things, and I'm trying to think of like one good thing. I'll just give you one story. One of my good buddies, he I was trying to run this race, and he wasn't a big runner himself, and I really needed a ride to go like deep upstate to get there, and he was like, fuck it, I'll take you. And he drove me like a couple hours, and he actually ran the race as well as a non-runner. So that was a nice recent gesture.
Oh, that's beautiful. Do you still run a lot?
Uh, it's not too much. I run like once or twice a week, maybe twice a week, and relatively short
Okay.
distance, like 5 to 10K.
Yeah.
Nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
you?
I love it. It's amazing. No, I didn't. I did my time. I used to run, like I said, competitively from 16. I'm 37 now. I'm super old, but from 16 to 23, 24. Yeah, it. I loved it because it helps you understand the. I always said running was the easiest, hardest sport because
Mm,
everybody can do it, but to be very good at it, there's just all these kind of extracurricular things that go into it. But the
mm,
big challenge for me was it's a 365 kind of sport, and there's not really a lot of method to the madness. It's ultimately, and again, this is probably just my myopic view of it, but it was just who can put in the most miles, quality miles at pace without getting hurt. those were the people that won the races. And so it was always just this, how hard can you push your car, metaphorically speaking. But there's a certain beauty to it. So I recently got into meditation in the last 4 or 5 years, but I think my mental aspect was really, because I'm a little crazy, a little aggressive kind of. And so running was a nice way. It was like a very meditative activity. And we had some really nice parks. I grew up in Indiana. That's where I ran. And so we had some really nice parks where we could just run, and, 6-7 miles just in the forest running was actually a very mental cleanse for me. So that helped out a lot, but it was just hard. And going to school and running was just really difficult as well, where like I'll tell my kids, unless you're going to go pro in the sport, like you have an objective shot to go pro, or you are really in love with the sport. So I loved soccer, football. That was my passion. And then I ended up just being really good at running. So I just took that on, got a scholarship, et cetera, et cetera. But I never loved it. It was just, I was good at it, if that makes sense. And so with things of that nature, where it's not, and I don't say this as a pejorative, but it's not necessarily a quote unquote talent-based sport. It's an endurance-based sport. And so when you have that, there's just not like a lot you can do. It's basically just run. Whereas like when you play soccer, you could juggle, you could work on passing, you could work on shooting, you could work on strategy. There's all these different aspects to the game that you can work on. There's an off season where you rest and stuff like that, where running was just pervasive constantly throughout the year. And I was good, but there was kind of like levels to it, where I was probably like the third level of good, where there was like, these guys are going to be pro athletes. These guys are incredible. And I was like the worst of the best, if that makes sense. So I knew I was never going to beat these top guys. Even like my best day, their worst day, I'm still not going to touch them. Like these people were just absolute machines. And so there was a certain aspect of like, I'm giving up all these pieces of my life for something that I'm never going to be able to be at the top of, was always something that kind of stuck in the back of my mind, where I was just like, I like to play games I can win. And I was playing a game that it was just, no matter how hard I trained, or there's just, it is what it is. It is a good life lesson though, where it's just, some people are built different, where it's just, it is what it is, and try and play games that you can win, versus just kind of pissing into the wind, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's all about like you were saying, ultimately passion, and like that's what the person who's gonna outwork you is probably the person who's gonna have more passion for the sport or for the thing they're doing. And to be honest, kudos to you, man, for being a D1 runner, because you're right. I can't think of many more brutal sports to take part in. I mean, it's just I have so much admiration for runners. It's just like you said, there's nothing to it. You just get up and run every day until it hurts, and that's it.
It's it. They're the only two people, swimmers and wrestlers. Those were the only two other sports where I was like, all right, you guys have it worse than we do. But yeah, definitely very high on the commitment / pain scale. Okay, quick pivot into the value add segment. This is why the people bought the ticket. Tim, why'd you start 1-800-D2C, and why is it called that?
So I started 1-800-D2C to help ecom operators identify the right tools for their business. I thought it was a little bit difficult to keep up with all the new and latest technologies, and there wasn't a good resource out there to help you sort of distill that information down. So that's why I started it, and the reason why it's called 1-800-D2C is kind of a play on a yellow pages directory, where you're essentially organizing lots of information. And you can imagine, so that's why the website is all kind of yellowy, and it's got hints at that. And then the name 1-800-D2C, it's almost like a phone number. Call this helpline to get some answers on the world of D2C.
I love it. Yeah, it's fantastic branding. It's a fantastic website. You're a very good writer, which is, again, even more impressive that it's your second language that you're writing in, which is crazy. What are the best parts of running it? What are the hardest parts of running it?
The best part is easy. I'd say it's speaking with people like you, and I genuinely mean that. Like, I kind of see myself as like a glue in the ecosystem, helping again ecom individuals find access to the right technologies. So I get to speak to people who are building awesome brands, which is ultimately what's like my real passion, what I've always been drawn to, but also meet the enablers, the tech platforms, the great entrepreneurs who are able to build awesome businesses to support those D2C brands. So that's by far the best part. And then the toughest part is I guess managing a roadmap and then keeping everything, all the different plates spinning. So
Yeah.
I am bootstrapped, and I'm doing this mornings, evenings, weekends, uh, which is with again without like a massive bank account behind it to fund it. So everything needs to make sense. Like the revenue needs to come in at the right time to then fund the initiatives, etc. And there's so many ideas that I have, and I just have to take it step by step and not not bet the house, do things
Yeah.
at their own pace. I think that's one of the it's a fun piece as well, but it's also a tricky part of the puzzle.
Yeah. I go back and forth on this because we're kind of in the similar vein of we're really, really scrappy, but at the same time, we do have some coffers to lean on if we do have an initiative that we want to kind of push forward. But I think there's a certain aspect of like there's something in economics called the resource curse. Like the more resources you have, it can kind of be like a horrible thing, especially if you don't have like a great government in place, blah blah blah. And I think there's something to be said about that a little bit in D2C when people raise too much money and they just are looking for ways to spend the money versus looking for ways to push forward business objectives, and then they realize, okay, I need X or Y or Z resources. I think it's nuanced, but there's a certain flip where it's like at a certain point, like for example, like a CMO, like when you get all this money, there's a certain pressure that you feel to spend it, right? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like investors don't give you money just to sit on it. Like they want you to deploy the capital, but at the same time, you need to be deploying it in a really efficient manner. And so there's this really nice tension that you have where sometimes I think when you have so many resources, you lose the scrappiness that got you to the place that somebody wanted to give you resources. So it's a bit paradoxical. Do you feel like
Yeah.
that, or do you think like if you guys had more money, it would be roses and butterflies?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, like wholeheartedly, and I think it's a really nuanced and tough discussion because obviously having more resources is a good thing. So yes,
Right.
you want more resources, but you want to stay scrappy. So finding that balance is tough. And I will say this, something I've been thinking about. It's nothing too deep, but like I've been on a few demo calls recently with very large tech companies, and you meet some individuals, or you meet like you kind of get insight into the org structure, and you're like is this are we just adding red tape for no reason?
Yes.
Like does
Yes.
this need to be there? And that's obviously money and resources that they're spending on extra parts of their of their machine. And it might not always be money well spent, but the reason they have that money is not necessarily because they've raised. It could ultimately just be, I mean, we could talk about like a Google or like a Facebook
Mhm.
with the Facebook reps that I don't know if you've ever had the
Oh my
pleasure of
gosh.
speaking with, etc. Uh, but it's not because they've raised. It's just because they have so much money,
Yeah.
and they have so much money because they're tech platforms, and tech platforms have the beauty of scaling like disproportionately faster than the people, the manpower behind it. So when you have all that extra cash from your revenues, etc., you're kind of just like, well, why not hire 10 people in this department? And then you have a
Yep.
department that doesn't really move the needle.
Yep.
And so it doesn't always have to be tied to, VCs are bad and it's bad to take VC funding and
Totally
all that
with you.
stuff. It could also happen from revenue.
That's a really prescient point. The other thing too that I would say is there's a certain assumption that when you hire more people, things can become more efficient. You're going to move faster. And if anything, I found the opposite, where there's a certain aspect of, for sure, like when, so for example, I was basically running the triple whale marketing department by myself up until
Hmm.
February. And then we started hiring people. And then there was like this, oh yeah, we finally, there's more hands on deck, blah, blah, blah. But there's a certain aspect of, to your point, of like that weird 10-person team of like, what is everybody kind of doing with their day? Like
Yeah.
there's a certain aspect of like just adding headcount for headcount's sake or hiring into the future. I think is can be smart in some senses, but that's predicated on the fact that you know what the future is going to be.
Hmm.
And then two, we've experienced sometimes where, and again, this is early stage startup, so you just have all sorts of very unique experiences, but sometimes just hiring or more headcount means less efficiency, means less productivity, and it's very, again, kind of paradoxical in that sense of like you have more people doing less work.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of a place where it really helps to, again, going back to like those scrappy roots, I think is really, really pressing. I love the VC idea that's a really good point. Like money, resources aren't necessarily inherently bad, but they can give you the ability to fake your way into thinking you're being productive when you're actually just lighting $100 bills on fire.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's tough for everyone. It's
It
not.
is tough for everyone.
It's a challenge that most businesses will incur, and no one yet necessarily has like the silver bullet to solve it.
Yeah, no, very well put. So you're rubbing up against a lot of these D2C founders, these D2C creators, all of this. What do you see some of the kind of biggest mistakes that you encounter with these people? Like, do everybody's, oh, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that, or this is something that in the future I won't do again?
Yeah, good question. I think there's maybe two things that I can call out. Well, one, the D2C game is incredibly difficult. So ultimately it comes down to grit and passion. To go back to one of the earlier points, those are going to be the founders that stand the highest chance of winning. So but the first mistake I might see is people not focusing enough on uncovering like where they fit into the world. Why
Ooh,
why
I
should
love that.
yeah, why should people go here instead of there? And just, it's not because you managed to get a couple thousand orders in your first 6 months that you've secured your place in the world, in the way that other established brands have. So just taking those orders for granted and not digging further as to understand the psychology of the purchasers behind it is probably a mistake. And then a mistake that I enjoy talking about a little bit, because it could be paradoxical with the line of work that I'm in, but it's uh, uh, beefing up the tech stack too much
Yeah,
too early
yeah.
and adding on too many costs. So we could talk about the tech stack. Ultimately, the costs on a tech stack, they're not going to, yes, they can break the bank in some instances, but it's not going to be, it's not going to ruin your business necessarily, and it's easy to turn on and off. But so you could make a bigger point about spending in general, and we were just talking about human
Yeah.
resources, hiring too many people who don't necessarily have a role that's fully secured. But to go back to the point about tech stacks, because again, I do think it's interesting with my position in the market. um, you can, I've seen great businesses and I've interviewed fantastic businesses who have gone really far with super lean tech stacks, because ultimately uh, a, a tech stack is not necessarily like a revenue driver. It's more like helping, it's like an operations component. It helps
Yep.
you run your business more efficiently, get more insights
So well
faster.
put.
And so yeah, so don't go crazy. Don't go crazy shopping, which people rarely do, but I do encounter some instances where people ask me like, "And what should I do for X?" And I'm like, "Well, you probably don't need to think about X until 6 months from now."
Man, I think that is so on the head, and it sounds funny coming from one of these people in living in the tech stack with TW. But I think there's a certain aspect of making sure that you're just not getting tools for tools' sake. Like there should be some pain that you're feeling that this tool then alleviate. and or platform or what have you. Because I do feel like there's like I know a guy that's doing some really cool kind of return stuff, and the businesses he's working with are massive businesses, and two of them are still literally operating off of spreadsheets. I'm talking multi-billion-dollar companies, and the whole company's still run off a spreadsheet, which absolutely blows my mind. But to
Mm-hmm.
your point, there's a certain aspect of maybe they should find a tool set that they can move into. But I think that's a really great advice where you can get into some really weird quagmires, especially too if you get into like 6 or 12 month contracts where it isn't as easy to turn on and off, and you're like, oh man, I'm on the hook for $5K a month for a tool that's not even making my business any better, and I'm just bleeding this money.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's a really, really prescient point.
And actually, even more to like to your point, uh, more realistically, when you're talking about 5 to 10 months contracts or more, you're talking about agencies, and
Yes.
founders do make that mistake quite a bit. It's hard to meet a founder who has never been burned by an agency. It just it just happens. Um,
Yeah.
and so I guess if there's ever a piece of advice on that, it's yeah, try and stay away from these long-term commitments. These
Yep.
and if you can go month to month, that would be the best negotiation tactic.
Yeah, that's what I recommend for people where if you can, even if you have to pay a premium for the optionality, it's much better to pay 1 or 2 months that are inflated and then you can pull the ripcord versus you're dealing with a 6, 8, 10 month kind of horror story of you're just bleeding money and these people are taking up your time. They're not doing good work, et cetera, et cetera. Not that there's not great agencies out there, but there's
Mhm.
definitely a lot of fuckery in the space where yeah, you can get into some. I love how you said that it's really hard to encounter a D2C founder that has not had some sort of horror story with an agency. That's so true. So I was doing some research on you, and I saw you have a little bit of a beef with subscriptions. So do you want to talk about that a little bit with your? Because I love how you have instead of subscriptions, you think I should be framed in terms of memberships, and I thought that was the most clever. Like I absolutely loved it. I'm almost thinking of like we need to change our Triple Whale subscription to become a Triple Whale membership, and part of your membership is X, Y, and Z. Like I think that is one of the coolest mental model flips on the planet. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's actually happening. Like, lots of brands are changing their terminology on their sites to talk more about memberships as opposed to subscriptions. Um, I think like a subscription is that's almost like the business model term that a company like Spotify or Netflix might use. And but when you're dealing with a brand, you're dealing with something emotional, something that you want to feel a part of. It's much nicer to be a part of a membership. So subscription defines I guess, the cadence at which you receive goods, and membership defines uh, the benefits that come with engaging with a brand, putting your money where your mouth is, and engaging with the brand for the long term. That's the rough idea behind all of that. And so the one example I often talk about in terms of memberships, and you might know this brand too, they're called Rafa. They do cycling gear. Have
Yeah,
you
okay.
ever
Peripherally, I know them peripherally, but not super in depth.
Such a cool business. I mean, they're not necessarily a D2C darling because they're not known for that, but they make cycling gear
Yeah.
for super for super enthusiasts of road cycling. And they've got these retail stores in lots of different locations. So in London, in New York, in SF, like all over the world. And as part of a membership with Rafa, you can buy premium gear that's all pink. And so when you're out on the road and you're seeing
Mhm.
somebody rocking the pink Rafa gear, you're like, oh shit, you're legit. You're a legit
Yeah.
cyclist and you're a real diehard Rafa fan. And I can spot you from a mile away because you're wearing fuchsia pink, and also I can start a conversation with you. So that's one of the perks. The other perk you get is well, you're traveling. Rabba, you're all over the world. You were in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago. You love cycling. Go to the Rafa store, and as a member, you can rent one of our bikes. And their bikes are like premium. super premium. So you don't have to haul your bike all the way from Austin to Barcelona to go bike riding. You can
That
get
is
a very
cool.
premium bike as part of the membership. That's the second benefit. And the third benefit is, once you're done cycling, typically cyclists, or at least there's a myth around that. I don't know if it's a myth or if it's reality. You go for coffee. You go for coffee with the people
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you went on a ride with. And so they have a coffee shop. And guess what? Coffee's on the house if you're a member. So for me, I'm like, that's if you're a D2C brand trying to build community and all that, you want to build membership, and it has to kind of look like that. And one of the
That
components of
is
that,
amazing.
you talk about loyalty and the other components that get tacked on to subscription and memberships. That's definitely a part of the equation. And then there's this whole another topic, because I do think you're interested in the crypto space, the token gated experiences,
Yeah.
where you get access to custom gear because you're a token holder. This is what's happening here. You're a member, you bought it online. There's no crypto or blockchain component at all, but you bought the membership and now you have access to the pink gear. And that's a token gated experience on its own, which I think is a good model for the future.
Man, you're blowing my mind. We're changing the memberships tomorrow. That is such a cool idea. And the other thing that you really hit on that just illuminated, like my mind is just spinning right now, is the inherent almost so not only the community and not only like the emotional connection, but it just feels different, where the subscription does feel like a transaction, where the community or the membership feels like a club, and then I get these perks as part of that club. And so like a transactional relationship versus something built off of a community, and then because I'm part of that community, I get X, Y, and Z. It sounds like it's the same thing, but it's totally different. I'm not doing the math of like, okay, cool, this subscription gets me 3 cups of coffee, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh man, I'm part of this community, and these are all the perks that I can take advantage of to help either cement my status in the community, to connect with other people that I care about that are interested in the same things that I am, or to have access to exclusive things that nobody else has access to. Man, I love that. That's a big epiphany for me. That's a big mind shift. That's very well put.
And another thing to kind of cement all of that, to maybe think about is, a subscribed customer is not, they're not just people are seeing maybe a subscribed customer as a higher LTV customer, but they're not just a higher LTV customer. There's somebody who's like stocking their home with your goods and probably tells all their friends about your goods. They're consistently, putting your stuff in their world. So they can't wait to talk about your brand. They can't wait to share it with their friends. They can't wait to be the evangelists. They're not just a higher LTV. They actually have power to influence many people around them. So they're a real community member. They should be a member, not a subscriber.
Man, that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. I love that. How do you see the next 2 to 3 years unfolding in e-commerce?
Um, I think, well, probably I would say more emphasis on brand than in the
Yeah.
past few years, just because it's just such a brutal game out there, and as we talked
Hard.
about, that's what makes the difference between a good brand and a not so good D2C brand. It's grit and passion, for solving a real problem in the world and seeing where it fits in the market. So more of that, um, and and I think like more sophistication of the space as a whole.
Yeah.
We're still in the early days. Triple Whale is how many years old? Like a year and a
Not
half.
even, yeah, yeah, barely a year and a half, really,
And
maybe 6 months of actual, like, really being around.
how crazy is that? And you
It's
guys
crazy.
are such a huge player in the market, and you have such a great solution. Uh, in the next 2 years, can you imagine how much more progress you're going to make after that? So more sophistication, and we'll get closer to what we were just talking about with Rafa, for example, to actually enabling those types of crazy custom experiences, and making those available to the everyday merchant on Shopify. So more sophistication, more focus on brand.
Yeah, I totally endorse those. What about marketplaces? You've written in the past that marketplaces seem to be a big trend. Do you see those still cropping up, or do you think those are kind of going to go away, or like kind of? I think Nick Sharma does something where he's aggregating some brands. There's a few kind of like things going down where people are kind of aggregating all these other things in terms of a marketplace. Maybe not per se like a literal marketplace, but I just know you've written in the past about kind of marketplaces, and so I didn't know if you want to comment on that at all.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm super bullish on them. And to me, they make a lot of sense. And I was writing a lot about that 6 months ago. And to be honest, in the past 6 months, I haven't seen it happen
Yeah,
in real life.
same.
So
Yeah, yeah.
is it gonna happen later? Is it never gonna happen? I don't really know, but conceptually, I'm still bullish on it, meaning that you know, like an online well you know, like an online grocery store of your like Erewhon, is that the brand, the
Yep.
grocery
Yep.
store in
Super, a
LA?
little bit fancy. Yeah, yeah, like
So,
a fancy Whole Foods.
fancy Whole Foods. And what do they pride themselves on is the curation of amazing products. So I just spoke to the team at Taika, for example, that sells their coffee, and their coffee's in there. uh, I might want to buy a few other goods from Erewhon to try these different goods, and if they had a presence online, which they probably do, then I now have access to this marketplace where I can buy these goods. And for me, that's convenient. It makes a lot of sense. So I I thought there would be one already challenging at Dick's Sporting Goods.
Yep.
Maybe it'll have to be you and I
Let's
starting that
go.
up. but there's so many, you know, so 10,000, Roan, all these stance, all these great sports D2C brands in one place, you know,
Yep.
to challenge the Dick's Sporting Goods. Can we make that happen? I'm super bullish on it, but like you said, it's not really happened yet. So who knows if it's just a matter of time, or if it's just not a good business to be in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't unwind the economics there, but I mean, because in a way, a little bit of 1-800 D2C is a pseudo marketplace, right? Like it's a very nice curated directory, and so that's ultimately what a marketplace can and can't be. And then, yeah, we should figure something out though, because I think you're really onto something. The one question I would ask you is, do you think a marketplace will be more successful under a brand or under a personality? So like a Nick Sharma having his own marketplace versus 1-800 D2C's, you know, here's the best apps to buy, or here, if that makes sense. Do you think a brand would be more successful, or a personality running a marketplace?
So I've actually thought about this, and I think it's a really fun topic to discuss. 2 points. One, I think it would be a brand,
Oh,
because
okay.
a person will only be able to represent themselves, and so because a person has, uh, unless they're like an athlete of everything, they wouldn't be able to really provide a legit marketplace of sports goods, for example. So I think a brand would be able to do that. And how fun would it be, and how easy would it be to sponsor athletes to support you as a brand of the marketplace? Because you're just giving them
Tracking.
Stance, and you're giving them Roan, and you're giving them you know, all the cool D2C sports brands, but it's from you. So they're representing you, and they're an athlete of you as the marketplace, yet they're rocking all these different brands. So it's easy. I would imagine it's easy to find influencers who want to be a part of that, because they get goods from lots of different brands. So that's one part. But the part about the influencer, um, this is something I've been thinking about a ton. And and actually, Adrian Alfieri, if you've ever stumbled upon him, he's a writer. He runs his own content marketing agency called Verbatim, and
Great name.
he introduces interviews a lot of founders in a series called The Proof. And as a part of that, he asks them quick fire questions like, "What's your favorite book? What's your favorite this? What's your favorite that?" And what's your favorite way to wind down? And a lot of times they're quoting different products or different things. And that,
Ah,
for me, that's the stack of the human. And I think Rob has got an interesting stack, and I think somebody else might have a very
that's
interesting stack.
interesting.
And
I
so I always
love
thought,
that.
I always thought about, buying up a domain called, or setting up a website called Life According To, and
That's
that would be
brilliant.
your favorite things, and that's your stack. So I think a marketplace like that, based on the personality, works really well, and it would work really well in a lightweight sort of link in bio type way. But a marketplace as a whole for sports, I think that should be a brand.
Tim, you're brilliant. That's amazing. That's really smart. And it gets away from the pigeonhole of you're getting the best of both worlds because you have the personality interviewing the other personality, but by definition, you're going to have differentiation because everybody is different. And so you're going to have these different texts or these different life stacks just by happenstance because everybody enjoys life and lives life in a different way, even no matter how nuanced. That's brilliant. That's a really good answer. I was 100% in on the influencer, but that's a way better way to do it. And then I do agree with you on the brand because the acquisition mechanics and the economics just work a little better with that brand, especially if you're trying to take over X, Y, or Z vertical.
Yeah.
You have thought about this a lot. Those are very polished answers.
And you know what? The other thing I'll note on there is Amazon has launched something. A friend of mine was showing me where if you're an influencer, you can now say what are your favorite items and kind of link a profile, your Amazon profile of
Yeah.
goods. So it's actually already happening via the Amazon marketplace. You could have the Rabba stack
Interesting.
on Amazon, which is pretty cool. If you want to live like your favorite athlete, you could technically just buy everything they own via Amazon.
That is so interesting. What an interesting pitch. I love that. Um, Tim, you made it to the rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, amazing. France, overrated, underrated?
Uh, Underrated.
Oh, I like it. London, overrated, underrated?
Underrated.
Oh, okay, okay. Yellow branding, overrated, underrated?
Uh, Overrated.
Oh, okay, I got one out of you. Community, overrated, underrated?
It's hard to build an active community. So yeah, just for shits and giggles, I'll say overrated.
Ooh, I like it. Getting spicy. Turn up the heat. Going to university, overrated, underrated?
Overrated.
I like it.
Yeah.
Shopify 2.0 themes, overrated, underrated?
Underrated.
I dig it. Marketplaces, overrated, underrated?
Underrated.
Oh, I like it. TikTok, overrated, underrated?
Underrated.
Ooh, amazing. NFTs, overrated, underrated?
Overrated.
Oh, you're gonna catch some heat. You're gonna catch some heat. What's your favorite meal and why?
Mm,
You're half French. You guys do cuisine better than anybody.
they say that. They say that, but actually, I'm much more enjoy like a Thai dish, like going to a
Thai.
couple. There's a couple restaurants I love in New York, for example, where you get a cow soy, for example. That's a phenomenal dish, and so I guess let's go with that. That would be my answer.
Amazing. What's your favorite podcast?
How I Built This.
Yes, they're so good. They're so good.
So
So fascinating.
so good.
Favorite place to travel to and why?
Love going to New York now. I guess now that I don't live there, I love going to New
Really?
York. It's just the energy's there and the creativity's there. It gives you a boost of everything.
I totally with you. My only pushback on New York is I would burn up there. Like it's just so energetic, but there's no way for me to turn off. I have a horrible time of like stepping out of the fire, and I know
Yeah.
I would just disintegrate there. But I love it. Manhattan, Brooklyn, all of it is just a really really good vibe. But yeah, it's too much for me sometimes, and I hate the cold.
Yeah, you said place to visit. So I guess to visit, I would say I'd still say New York, but I agree to live. Yeah, maybe not so much.
That's challenging. All right, last one. If you could dinner with 3 people, dead or alive, fictional or non-fictional, who would they be? So there's a 4-person table. You're sitting at the head. You have 3 seats to fill. Who's getting the invite from Tim?
Like, I want somebody really funny, so I'll go with like Eddie Murphy at the table.
I think you're the first person that's chosen a comedian. That's a great point. Humor is such a diffuser. It's a really good point.
Then somebody who's like, let's. I mean, you know what? I've never been asked this question, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
Give me like a Jean-Michel Basquiat as well. I want an artist in there.
Be very cool. Very cool. I just got to see a couple of his paintings when I was in Barca. We went, or not Barca, excuse me, Spain. We went to the Guggenheim in Bilbao.
Epic.
Very cool. Yeah, very
Epic.
Cool. Okay, so you got
Eddie, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Eddie Murphy, and then I'll go for an athlete. I definitely want somebody there. Like talk about a crazy person with a crazy work ethic, like a Michael Phelps. Give me a Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
I don't know how he would mesh with the crew and what the dinner vibes would be like, but I'm sure he's got an interesting view of the world.
Yeah, it has to, right? I mean, there's no way you can, even with those natural gifts, like they were doing ESPN used to do sports science, and he's like, if you were creating a swimmer from like genetics, he's like just perfect in every way. But even then, you still have to put in the work. Like he's just supremely talented, and being able to win that many medals is just beyond me. Like that is an interesting table. That's a fun dinner. That's a fun dinner, Tim.
Yeah, I don't know if I would give you the same answer tomorrow, but let's roll with that first dinner, and it's going to be a fun one.
It'll be a fun one. Amazing. Tim, dude, thank you so much for taking the time. If you're ever out in Austin, give me a shout. Let the people know how they can connect with you, how they can connect with 1-800-D2C. This time is yours, my friend.
Cool. Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. In terms of staying connected, I am on Twitter, so you can find my personal account, Tim__MSK, which I'll send over, and 1-800-D2C, and then subscribe to my newsletter on the website. It's called Yellow Notes.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Tim's a phenomenal writer. 1-800-D2C is actually a sensational directory with a bunch of really great essays as well as tech stack recommendations. Highly recommend it. At least just go see the branding people. The yellow themed yellow pages. I don't know these kids know what yellow pages are these days, but you used to get this big book of a directory of all the people in your city that you could look up with businesses and phone numbers and the whole thing. So it's a wonderful homage to that, Tim. You've done a great job there. Yeah, man, I've just had such a fun time. I think this podcast I've taken away the most from. Like you really look at marketing, acquisition, branding in a very unique way that has really shifted a lot of my views. So I really appreciate all your thoughtful and eloquent answers. Go follow Tim on the Twitters. Go read 1-800-D2C. And if you do want to go get more involved with Triple Whale, we are triplewhale.com. We're on the Bird app at Triple Whale. And then we have a fantastic newsletter that goes out every Tuesday, Thursday called Whale Mail. You can subscribe by going to triplewhale.com/whalemail, WHALEMAIL. Tim, thanks so much again. You crushed it. I appreciate you taking the time from France. And then, like I said, if you're ever back in New York, we'll connect. Or if you ever make it to Texas, we'll take you out for some drinks, have some fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Rob. A big fan of yours and also the Triple Whale fam. So appreciate it.
Appreciate you, brother. And we're switching to memberships tomorrow, people. You will no longer be able to buy a Triple Whale subscription. It will be a Triple Whale membership. And maybe we need some fuchsia biking suits or something. Take a page out of Rafa, right? Like, oh, that's a Triple Whale member. We know.
Yes.
Brilliant. All right, folks, that's it. That's another ROAS in the books. Thanks again, Tim. And we'll see everybody on the flip. Bye-bye.